Well, today we'll be covering something that, for many, became kind of the black sheep of this particular franchise, at least as far as the main entries are concerned. Personally, I never really understood why it garnered such animosity from a fairly significant portion of its fanbase, but I guess we'll see what's what as we continue my Metal Gear Retrospective. Yes, today we'll be looking at the rather infamous sequel to Metal Gear Solid, namely Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty. As I mentioned, this game is somewhat polarizing as some fans think it's pretty great, whereas others pretty much hate it. Don't get me wrong, it was successful and most would still call it pretty decent, but quite a few people did find it a bit disappointing. We'll get to all that eventually though, but I think I should start by explaining where I'm coming from with this one. You see, one of the reasons I may not have found this as misleading or lackluster as others is that this was technically my first real experience with this franchise. No, you heard right, this was actually my introduction to this franchise. Oh, I seem to remember trying a demo or something of the first Solid before this one, but no, I hadn't really played any of these games before this one. As I recall, it wasn't even the Metal Gear games themselves that got me interested in the first place, it was Zone of the Enders. You see, Zone of the Enders was another Kojima game that originally included a certain demo for the then upcoming Sons of Liberty. After giving that a try, I anxiously awaited the full game, which more than met my expectations. In fact, I found it so enjoyable that I had to track down and experience the rest of the franchise, and I've been following it ever since. And now that I've explained all of that, a lot of you are going to claim that this somehow makes my opinion of the game less valid, as I didn't actually grow up with this franchise. I didn't have the same connection with the characters or whatever. Well, I have only one response to that. Neither did you! No, really, most people who spout this nonsense didn't really follow the franchise from the beginning either. They usually started with Metal Gear Solid, which was the third entry in the franchise. Hell, it was technically the fourth or fifth entry if you count the non-canonical games, so no, your connection with the franchise isn't that strong either. Either way, we'd better just get started if we're going to have any hope of getting through this in one video, but I'm actually not quite sure where to start with this one. You see, this game kind of has two starting points, and depending on your previous experience with the series and or which version of the game you play, the beginning may be slightly different. In my case, the game opened with the so-called plant chapter when I first played it. I had no idea that there was actually an additional tanker chapter until well after I'd finished the game, so I may have had a slightly different experience than most for my first playthrough. Still, it's not like I didn't play through the other chapter after I discovered it, I just played it last instead of first. Ultimately, I am pretty certain that the intention was always to have people play the tanker chapter first, even if that is aimed a bit more at those already familiar with the franchise. In fact, this introductory chapter is a big part of why the fans got a bit ticked off with the rest of the game. In any case, let's just get to it, shall we? The game opens with a mysterious hooded man walking along the George Washington Bridge in New York. After discarding his cigarette and his raincoat, he suddenly turns invisible and leaps off the side of the bridge onto a large tanker passing underneath, revealing that he is in fact Solid Snake. Yeah, I'm shocked too. It turns out that Snake and Otacon are now part of a group called Philanthropy, a non-government organization working to eradicate the world of Metal Gears. It seems they have received intel that a new Metal Gear is being transported by this Marine Corps tanker, and Snake's mission is to obtain photographic evidence so the project can be halted. Unfortunately, the tanker is suddenly hijacked by an armed group of Russian mercenaries led by Colonel Sergei Galukovich, his daughter Olga, and our old pal Revolver Ocelot. Snake heads to the bridge of the tanker to figure out where it's heading, and after relaying this information to Otacon, he spots and confronts Olga in a relatively straightforward boss fight. After taking care of Olga, Snake heads for the holds. After finding and taking the pictures he needs of the new Metal Gear named Ray, the commandant of the ship wraps up the speech he was giving as Ocelot suddenly interrupts the proceedings. Galukovich then appears quite literally out of nowhere and grabs the commandant. Seriously, where did he come from? Ocelot reveals to everyone that he's holding a detonator for a bunch of Semtex placed around the ship as the rest of Galukovich's soldiers rappel in to secure Ray. Unfortunately for Galukovich, it seems Ocelot has his own plans for this new Metal Gear.
I regret to inform you that I have no intention of selling Metal Gear. As I said, I came to take it back. Returned to the Patriots.
Before anyone can figure out what Ocelot's talking about, he takes out both Galukovich and the ship's commandant. He then detonates the Semtex as the ship starts to sink while very calmly preparing to climb aboard Ray. Before he can do so, however, Snake confronts him, causing a strange and, let's be honest here, fucking stupid thing to happen to Ocelot.
It's been a while, brother.
Who are you?
You know who I am.
Liquid?
The price of physical prodigy. Few more years and you'll be another dead clone of the old man. But I live on through this arm!
Yup. Ocelot becomes possessed by the spirit of Liquid, complete with his voice and everything, because he apparently lives on through the arm Ocelot had grafted onto his body. Makes total sense, right? I mean, come on. You cannot take this shit seriously. Sure, they technically explain how this is possible in future games, and I guess I've heard dumber plot devices, but this is still pretty damn stupid. Honestly, how can you do anything but laugh when you hear a line like this?
I live on through this arm!
Either way, Ocelot/Liquid then enters Ray, cuts a hole in the side of the ship, and escapes as Snake seemingly drowns in the remaining wreckage. Cut to 2 years later, as an armed group led by members of an anti-terrorist unit called Dead Cell have seized control over the Big Shell, an offshore cleanup facility that went up where the tanker sank. These terrorists are demanding $30 billion in exchange for their hostages, and they say they'll blow up the entire facility if they don't get it. It also turns out that their hostages just happen to include the President of the United States himself. That's lucky. In response to this, Foxhound sends in an agent initially called Snake to handle the situation, but as it turns out, this Snake is not the Snake we all know and love. You see, after he makes it into the Big Shell, he immediately has his codename changed to Raiden. That's right, we suddenly have to play as a completely new character. Now, I get that some people might be a bit disappointed by this, and there definitely are some annoying and tedious aspects to this character, but based on the way people actually responded to him, you'd think he raped their entire fucking family or something! Yeah, this is what I was alluding to earlier when I said that some people were a bit disappointed with the game. And when I say disappointed, I mean fucking outraged. Sure, this backlash did eventually die down, especially after his appearance in a certain sequel, but when the game first came out, everyone despised Raiden and wanted to lynch Kojima for making him the protagonist. From my point of view, I never ever understood why everyone got so bent out of shape about this guy. Sure, I get that you would prefer to play as Snake, and again, Raiden is not a perfect character, but he's certainly not despicable either. Yeah, he's a rookie and much less impressive than Snake, but then again, he's supposed to be. That's the fucking point. Yeah, I know, I just don't get it since this was my first real experience with the games and all, but at least to me, Snake is a bit more awesome in this game than any of the others, and a big part of that is that you get to see him do his stuff from the eyes of a newbie. I just don't think you get the same wow factor from him if you actually played as Snake, so in my opinion, this tactic fucking worked. That said, none of that would matter if Raiden was simply a shit character, but I'm sorry, he just isn't. No, he's not really all that endearing, especially not at first, but I still think he's a pretty memorable character with quite an intriguing backstory. Sure, he can get a bit whiny and he spends way too much time yakking it up with his girlfriend, but all in all, he works pretty damn well. I guess we might as well take a moment here to also talk a bit about some of the other characters in this pod. Like I briefly mentioned, Raiden does have a girlfriend named Rose who tags along on this mission, and if there is any character to hate in this game, my vote would go to her. I mean, this is a time-sensitive and dangerous mission, and what's her main concern?
Do you know what day it is tomorrow?
April 30th. Is there something special about it?
Isn't there?
I can't remember. I'm sorry.
Oh well, I'll keep trying till I hear the answer.
Really? That's what you're going to focus on? You're not going to provide him with intel or try to calm his nerves? You're just going to pester him about what day it is tomorrow? Bitch, he's not in a fucking paintball tournament here. If he fails, people will fucking die. Your little anniversary isn't really all that important right now. Then there's Raiden's commanding officer, whom you'll most likely recognize. Yup, it's none other than Colonel Roy Campbell, the same man who used to command Snake. Weirdly though, he's a bit stiffer and almost robotic in tone and presence in this one. As it turns out, however, that actually makes quite a bit of sense, but we won't go into that quite yet. I guess this would also be a good time to go over some of the new gameplay features of the game. Like I mentioned last time when I talked about a certain remake of the previous game, you do now have the ability to not only look, but also shoot in first person. Unlike that remake though, this game is actually designed with this in mind, so it works much better here. You can now also peek around corners and pop out for a quick jump out shot, giving you a much better and thorough overview and control of any situation. In addition, you can also hang off railings and ledges, something that becomes a bit of a necessity at times as it's a good way to get around certain guards and the only way to traverse at all in other areas. Another, and at least in my opinion, much bigger addition is the ability to hold up guards. Basically, if you sneak up on an enemy and get close enough, you can hold them up by aiming your weapon at them. You can then make them hand over any items they may have by aiming at their head or groin, and the first things they hand over are their dog tags. That's right, you can actually collect an insane amount of dog tags by holding up the gods in the game. This is actually a pretty fun and interesting challenge on its own, but luckily, they don't just leave it at that like they did in that piece of shit remake of the previous game. No, instead, these dog tags also serve as the way to unlock various extras for future playthroughs. The really clever thing about all this, though, is that you can't just unlock everything in one go. The thing is that instead of just having the same gods with the same dog tags no matter what, the game actually uses different gods and dog tags for each difficulty setting. Therefore, you'll have to play through all the various difficulties if you want all the unlockables. How brilliant is that? No, seriously, that's amazingly brilliant. I can't really think of any other games, or at least not that many, that actually give me a reasonable excuse for trying to complete them on multiple difficulties. I mean, who really gives a flying fig Newton how badass the higher difficulties are? I want some loot, damn it! In any case, there is one more aspect to these holdups worth mentioning. While most gods will give up their tags right away, there are a few tough guys that require a bit more intimidation. These idiots will not hand over anything and instead just act cocky, but their tone quickly changes if you shoot them in a limb or even just a ground or wall near them. Not so tough after all, are you? Speaking of the gods, they've changed quite a bit as well. Oh, they're still relatively easy to deal with, but they're definitely smarter than before. For example, certain gods occasionally check in with their commander, and if they get killed, a squad will be sent out to investigate. If they find a dead god, they go into alert mode, so it's a good idea to hide any bodies when and if you can. That said, the gods are still pretty easily distracted, and they're apparently horny as hell. I mean, the second they catch a glimpse of a girly magazine, they immediately abandon their post to stare at it obsessively. They don't even take it to the bathroom or anything. They just lie down on the floor where the magazine is and ignores absolutely everything else around them. What the hell, guys? Seriously, it's okay to like pretty women, and we've all been a bit distracted by a hot piece of arse every now and then, but for fuck's sake, you're on guard duty here, and even if you weren't, it's a fucking magazine. Pick it up and take it with you. Don't just lie down on the floor and jerk off in front of everyone. Anyway, let's just get back to the story. Upon entering the Big Shell, Raiden is informed that SEAL Team 10 is also on the premises, but they aren't the only ones. It seems another lone agent is there as well, as Raiden catches a glimpse of him riding up an elevator after taking out a bunch of guards. Raiden is told to steer clear for now and instead take advantage of the situation and move forward. While Raiden's crossing a connecting bridge between two of the shell struts, Campbell intercepts the communication between the SEALs. It seems they've managed to secure both the president and some sort of package, but unfortunately they're then ambushed. Once Raiden makes it to their location, it seems he may be a tad too late.
What are you?
Well, let's see. He's super fast, he has fangs, and apparently he likes to drink other people's blood. Now, what is it you call those things that do all of that again? Oh yeah, broccoli!
Well then, my goal becomes clear. The broccoli must die.
No, of course he's not broccoli, but what he actually is makes almost just as much sense. After all, he is in fact a vampire. A fucking vampire. Sure, this series has already had its share of characters with relatively weird and or unexplained abilities, but an actual vampire? Really? Doesn't that just strike you as a tad out of place? I mean, this is Metal Gear, not fucking Buffy! In any case, yes, we do here have a vampire by the name of Vamp. He's one of the members of Dead Cell, and as has already been established, he's lightning fast, extremely skilled with blades, and basically impossible to kill. For now. As such, he nearly takes out Raiden right away, but luckily for him, a mysterious soldier stops him before he has a chance to do so. Unfortunately, this soldier then gets severely injured as Vamp attacks him, but Raiden does manage to prevent Vamp from outright killing him before Vamp receives a call and disappears. The injured soldier then introduces himself as Lieutenant Iroquois Pliskin, which is actually somewhat of a hint to who he really is. Spoiler, it's Snake. I mean, you already knew that anyway, right? After all, he doesn't disguise his very recognizable voice, he looks exactly like Snake only without his uniform, and he's backed up by none other than Otacon. Who the fuck did they think they were fooling with this? In any case, after they introduce to each other, Raiden and Snake discover the body of a Navy captain with half a handcuff on one of his wrists. Snake then sits down as he's feeling a bit woozy, as he gives Raiden a bit more info on Vamp and the rest of Dead Cell.
He's Romanian, a wizard with knives, as you saw.
What is he?
One of the members of Dead Cell, a special forces unit created by ex-President George Sears. The unit would launch unannounced assaults on government complexes for the ultimate terrorism simulation. But around the time their original leader died in prison, the unit began to unravel.
Why would they go after the big shell?
How should I know? I told you they were on the lunatic fringe.
What about their leader? He says he's Solid Snake.
Snake died 2 years ago.
Yeah, of course you did. Anyway, Snake then receives a call from another SEAL team. They're apparently located on the BC connecting bridge, and they appear to be in a firefight as the communication cuts out with a soldier screaming out in pain. Raiden and Snake agree to stay in touch, as Raiden heads for the bridge, while Snake stays behind to recover his strength. When he arrives on the connecting bridge, Raiden finds a couple of SEALs firing at a woman without landing a single hit. How is this possible? Well, apparently, this woman, called Fortune, is somehow immune to gunfire as bullets just fly past her. Sure, why not? Before Fortune destroys the bridge and kills the SEALs, Vamp comes in and takes the president and some briefcase away. Raiden is told not to go after them just yet, as they could decide to retaliate for that attack by blowing up the entire facility. As such, Campbell tells him to locate Peter Stillman, the bomb disposal experts the SEALs brought along, and get his help to find and defuse the bombs. When Raiden locates Stillman and reunites with Snake, it turns out that Stillman can't actually dispose of the bombs himself, as he has a prosthetic leg and would just slow them down. As such, Raiden and Snake will have to take care of them, which Raiden is a bit hesitant to do as he apparently has no experience with bombs. As it turns out though, they're pretty easy to deal with.
Now you spray this on the sucker and there we go. Simple, huh? The spray freezes the detonator instantly.
How long does the effect last?
There's no way the thing can detonate in this condition. Even if you leave it alone, it'll stay out of commission for at least 24 hours.
That's right, they're simply going to freeze the bombs. After they're given some bomb sensors, Snake and Raiden split up as they decide to take care of one shell of the facility each. As to defusing the bombs though, Stillman is concerned that they all seem to be misplaced. He turns out to be right as Snake eventually finds a bomb in an expected location, which isn't even the worst part.
These are sensor-proof.
What?
New model, I guess. The ionization sensor can't detect them. The whole thing is sealed tight to prevent vapor leak, and there's no trace of that cologne signature. Pete, looks like he fooled you.
Yes.
But you managed to find the thing anyway.
It was sheer luck.
Bombs that are invisible to the sensor?
Any ideas, Pete?
Are there more out there?
I'll go see for myself.
You can't move fast enough.
Actually, it turns out he can. You see, 5 years earlier, Stillman was involved in an explosion that he was at least partially responsible for. He claimed to lose his leg in the accident, but he actually walked away without a scratch and has pretended to be injured ever since in order to avoid facing the families of the real victims. Yeah, you hate this asshole now too, don't you? I mean, really? You faked losing a fucking leg? What the hell is wrong with you? Come to think of it, how the dick did he manage to hide this for 5 whole years? Are you seriously telling me no one ever wanted to see his leg, or that he never bumped his foot or something? What sort of brainless world is this? Stillman says he'll run over to this new odorless bomb himself, while the others finish taking care of the smaller ones. Once Raiden is done, Stillman tells him to go get a sound-based bomb detector back in the pantry he was hiding in, as that can detect even the odorless bombs. Unfortunately, when Snake is about to freeze his last bomb, Stillman realizes something just a bit too late.
Damn! That was it!
What's going on?
The detonator just woke up. It's counting down!
What happened?
The big ones were rigged to be activated when all the baby C4s went offline. Raiden, the one in Shell 1 should be counting down too. Hurry!
Yes, it turns out that all of that time Raiden and Snake spent locating and freezing all of those bombs was a waste. Okay, so obviously they didn't know about this, and you can't deny that it is a pretty clever plan, but from a gameplay perspective, it is a bit annoying to find out that all that time spent running around defusing bombs was pretty much you just shooting yourself in the foot. Either way, Raiden rushes off to the remaining bomb, but as he's getting close, it seems Stillman accidentally triggered the other bomb as he's killed in its inevitable explosion. Raiden manages to take care of the remaining bomb and is instructed to go after the president next, but before he gets very far, he's confronted by Fortune. Unable to actually shoot her, Raiden fends off Fortune's attacks as Campbell eventually contacts him. He informs him that Fat Man has apparently placed a new bomb on the facility's heliport and that it's already counting down. Vamp then joins the party and is about to leave with Fortune when Raiden fires at her but winds up hitting Vamp instead. While Fortune is distracted mourning the apparent loss of her lover, Raiden enters the nearby elevator and heads for the heliport. Being a vampire though, a few bullets aren't going to be enough to bring Vamp down.
There's no need for sorrow, Queen. I died once already.
Vamp.
I can't die twice.
No, of course you can't. That would just be silly. It makes much more sense that you could actually die about 5 or 6 times. At least. I mean, that's just natural. In any case, Raiden rushes over to the heliport and after freezing yet another bomb, Fat Man himself shows up as the two face off in a pretty easy but still somewhat intriguing boss fight. You see, Fat Man will occasionally plant bombs around the heliport, forcing Raiden to deal with those as well as Fat Man himself. It's still a pretty easy fight though, so Fat Man should go down relatively quickly. After defeating Fat Man and his bombs, Raiden is told to find and rescue the president and the other hostages, but unfortunately he has no idea where to begin looking. Luckily, he's then confronted by a cyborg ninja going by the name of Mr. X. This ninja actually contacted Raiden earlier to warn him about a minefield, which might make you think you know who it is, but no, it's not Grey Fox. Whoever he is, Mr. X claims to know how Raiden can find the president. Apparently, there's a secret service agent named Ames among the hostages that should know his current location. Mr. X also claims that the hostages are held in the Shell 1 core, but tracking down Ames won't be that easy. For one thing, the core is heavily guarded, and all personnel there is outfitted with the same outfit and weapons. As such, Mr. X gives Raiden the uniform he needs, but tells him he'll need to find an AK on his own. He'll also need to get past the retinal scan to gain access to the hostages, and after all of that, he can try to locate Ames. Unfortunately, not even Mr. X knows what Ames looks like. Hell, he doesn't even know if it's a man or a woman, but he does know that Ames wears a pacemaker. He therefore tells Raiden to get a hold of a directional microphone so he can listen to the hostages' heartbeats, as Ames's should have a distinct machine sound. Mr. X also reveals that the terrorists have a nuke in their possession, as well as the access codes needed to launch it. Yeah, remember that briefcase Vamp took with him when he nabbed the president? Apparently, that contained the launch codes for the terrorist nuke. Why would the president and his men take such a thing along with them on a tour of an offshore cleanup facility?
Because, after all, the big shell is the farthest thing from a cleanup plant there is. Dead Cell didn't have to bring a nuke along with them. It was right here to begin with.
A cover-up? But why? For what?
For Metal Gear that is housed here.
Metal Gear?
The very same. Bipedal nuke-capable vehicle Shadow Moses Infamy. This place is the R&D center for its newest incarnation.
What the hell is going on?
Yeah, what is going on? How is it possible that a game with Metal Gear in the title actually has a Metal Gear in it? I just did not see that coming. Really, I had no idea. Okay, so the fact that a Metal Gear is somehow involved in these proceedings isn't actually a shocker to anyone with a working brain cell, but trust me, that is far, far from the full story. It is, however, everything Mr. X is willing to disclose at this time, so Campbell decides their best bet right now is to trust him and tells Raiden to infiltrate the core and locate this Ames. After finding an AK, disguising himself in an enemy uniform and infiltrating the core, Raiden eventually makes it to the conference room where the hostages are held, but what about that pesky retinal scanner? After all, he can't just scan his own eyes, so what to do? Well, the solution is actually rather obvious when you think about it, which is exactly what you might not do. All you have to do here is lure one of the enemy guards away from their position, get behind them and hold them up. You can then put them in a chokehold by unequipping your weapons and pushing the attack button, and if you then drag them over to the scanner, Raiden will push them into it, forcing them to have their eyes scanned as the door finally opens. This is actually a pretty clever, albeit rather obvious solution, but I do have one minor problem with it. It doesn't really make sense. Seriously, couldn't the guard in question just close his eyes? I mean, it's not like Raiden actually forces them to have their eyes open, so why wouldn't they just keep them closed?
Oh!
Well, whatever the reason, Raiden does make it into the conference room and eventually tracks down Ames. He informs Raiden that the president is held on the first floor of the Shell 2 core. While Raiden is worried that he might have been killed, Ames is certain that he's still alive, as the terrorists will need him to activate their nuke.
The password is nothing less than the physiological data of the US president. This information, along with the DNA pattern, serve as a biometric password. The login must be made of the president's own free will. The input must also be reconfirmed hourly.
Why would they hide Metal Gear in an offshore plant?
The Big Shell was built specifically for the development of a new Metal Gear model. The inspection tour was to check its progress.
What's going on around here?
Well, isn't it pretty obvious what's going on? The government is clearly trying to build an underwater football stadium. I mean, how do you not see that? All jokes aside though, the full extent of what is actually going on does still come as a bit of a shock, even if it is quite ridiculous and outlandish, but you'll see what I mean. For now, Ames and Raiden get interrupted by the arrival of the terrorist leader as Raiden spies on him having a conversation with Ocelot. During this conversation, Raiden learns that the president is still alive and that the initial launch code entry has been made. It also appears the terrorists have placed Semtex traps on the connecting bridge between the two shells. As it seems the president is cooperating with the terrorists, at least for now, Ames tells Raiden to take care of him before the code can be confirmed. Unfortunately, Ocelot then interrupts their conversation and is about to kill Ames when he suddenly suffers some sort of heart attack and collapses on the floor. Before anyone has a chance to properly react to this, Ocelot turns his gun on Raiden as his identity is revealed. Luckily for him, the ninja suddenly shows up, holds off Ocelot and his men, and allows Raiden to escape. After eluding the guards and making it to the connecting bridge between Shell 1 and 2, Raiden easily deals with the Semtex there by locating and destroying all the blinking control units using a sniper rifle. Unfortunately, he is then confronted by the leader of the terrorists who claims to be Solid Snake. As it happens though, the real Snake doesn't like being impersonated so poorly.
That is not Solid Snake!
What a pleasant surprise, brother.
Save it. You work of mine.
Don't say you've forgotten me. Snake.
Snake?
That's right, Raiden! It turns out that the guy who acts like Snake, talks like Snake, has the same allies as Snake, and even uses two words that refers to snakes as his fake name, is actually Snake!
What a twist!
Either way, after Snake fires a grenade at the terrorist leader, who is revealed to be named Solidus, and he flies off the bridge, he suddenly reappears on the top of a Harrier piloted by Vamp. Where the hell this Harrier came from or how no one saw or even heard it coming is beyond me, but sure, let's just forget about that. The important thing is that Snake and Otacon are in serious trouble as their Kasatka helicopter is no match for a Harrier. Snake therefore tosses Raiden a missile launcher as he'll have to use that to shoot down the jet. I'm fairly certain Snake could have just fired this thing himself as he's in the back of the chopper, but I guess that would rob us of a pretty decent boss fight. After Raiden dodges a few rockets and a fair amount of bullets while pummeling the Harrier with missiles, Solidus and Vamp eventually go down. Unfortunately, a Metal Gear Ray suddenly swoops out of the water, catches the Harrier and fires a bunch of missiles, pretty much destroying the bridge as Raiden barely avoids falling to his doom. We also find out that Vamp is pretty much magic. Now, some people might have a bit of a problem with this, even considering this guy is apparently immortal and all, but the thing is, everyone should have a problem with this! No, really, if you even think of defending or justifying this completely ridiculous and totally unexplained ability Vamp just seems to have all of a sudden, you can sod off. There's absolutely no way this makes any sense, even after they sort of explain his other abilities in one of the sequels, and besides, this whole sequence is pretty fucking pointless. Seriously, it's not needed at all. Either way, Solidus, Vamp, and Ray escapes as Snake explains to Raiden what he and Otacon are doing there. Although the whole Metal Gear thing is their main concern, it turns out that Otacon also has a bit of a personal motive for being involved. Apparently, his half-sister is one of the hostages, as she's the computer wizard responsible for creating a very important part of the new Metal Gear software. I'll explain that a bit more later, but for now, Raiden tracks down the president and finds out that he's being held in a room behind an electrified floor. Sound familiar? Well, if it does, you already know where this is heading. Raiden has to find and fire a remote-controlled missile into the circuit panel for the floor. However, this is done ever so slightly differently this time. For one thing, you can't just guide the missile through a room, you actually have to fire and guide it through some air ducts. Why? Because the circuit panel is in the same room as the president. This also means that you have to be careful not to hit him or let him be near the explosion, which means it's best to distract him by knocking on a wall before firing a missile. This still isn't exactly difficult though, so it shouldn't take too long before the circuit panel is destroyed and Raiden can finally meet the president himself. He confirms that he input the launch codes willingly, as he apparently didn't want to be a puppet anymore. What the hell is he talking about? Well, you might want to grab a drink for this one.
I don't have any control. The real power is in the Patriots' hands.
The Patriots?
The truth behind this country. I'm not surprised you've never heard of them. Very few are aware of their existence, even among those with code word clearance.
Huh?
Politics, the military, the economy, they control it all. They even choose who becomes president. Putting it simply, the Patriots rule this country.
Yeah, it turns out that the president is not the leader of the country after all. He is actually just a pawn being used by a secret organization known only as the Patriots. The president claims that no one knows who they really are, only that their leaders consist of 12 men known as the Wise Men's Committee. Somehow, these 12 men dictate how everything in the country is run, even handpicking who becomes president by staging a fake democracy for the public. In an attempt to bribe his way into their ranks, the president agreed to cooperate with a terrorist so he could use Ray as a bargaining tool. Unfortunately, Solidus had other plans.
He actually wants to challenge the Patriots, even if it means the destruction of the world. Whether you believe it or not, the balance of power rests in the hands of the Patriots. Can you imagine what would happen if they ceased to function? Picture a massive political vacuum, a space that every powermonger will try to fill for their own greedy ends. I'm talking about an unregulated power struggle, panic, civil war, chaos.
Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria!
So to sum up, the US government isn't actually a government at all. A secret society of 12 rich old geezers somehow control the entire country, and the president wanted to bribe his way into their ranks, but changed his mind when he realized that Solidus's plans could cause global chaos. Yeah, sounds pretty stupid when you say it out loud, doesn't it? Stupid or not though, it is the story they're going with, and wouldn't you know it, it doesn't even end there. You see, it also turns out that Solidus is actually George Sears, the former US president. He is also the third product of the Les Enfants Terribles project that created Solid and Liquid, but he is supposedly a more well-balanced and disease-free version of his brothers. After losing the presidency and going underground to avoid being killed, Solidus waited until the Patriots completed their next Metal Gear project, which he now intends to hijack in an attempt to take down the Patriots once and for all. As it turns out though, this new project is not, as Raiden believes, the fully operational Ray he already has in his possession.
Then where's the new Metal Gear?
Right here.
What?
You're standing in it. To be more precise, this entire big shell facility is the new Metal Gear. The upper structure that you've seen is camouflage, designed to represent an offshore cleanup facility. The main structure extends from the foundation all the way down to the ocean floor. Arsenal Gear. That's the code name for the new Metal Gear.
That's right, it turns out that the new Metal Gear, called Arsenal, is actually some sort of massive impenetrable fortress protected by a horde of mass-produced Rays. Arsenal has full access to the US military's tactical network, as well as the country's nuclear armament, but this fortress is apparently quite a bit more than a giant weapon. Now, this part can be rather confusing, but try to bear with me. You see, Arsenal also contains an AI program called GW that will somehow sift through the growing flood of digital information and filter out only those things the Patriots deem fit for public consumption. Basically, it's a giant censorship tool to be used by the Patriots in order to more easily control the public. At least that's what we're told for now, as the president tells Raiden to locate Emma Emmerich, Otacon's half-sister, as she's apparently the only one that can install a computer virus the president has into GW in order to stop Arsenal Gear and Solidus's plans. After giving Raiden all of this information, the president has one more rather strange request.
Kill me.
What the?
There's no time to argue. The final check for my vital ID will start any second. If you kill me now, you'll at least prevent the nuclear strike.
No! That's abusing your right to free speech, Mr. President. Or is it ex-president? Alas, my finger must have slipped.
Yeah, this is actually kind of awkward. I mean, I meant to shoot you, but now our entire plan is kind of fucked. My bad, I guess. Well, actually, it seems Ocelot deliberately shot the president, which doesn't seem to make any sense. After all, they still need him to reconfirm his password, don't they? Raiden and the others decide to figure it out later, as Raiden is told to honor the president's last request and find Emma Emmerich, which turns out to be a bit trickier than it might sound. The thing is that the area where Emma is supposedly held has started to flood, forcing Raiden to traverse it underwater. This isn't really too difficult to do, just keep an eye on your oxygen level and resurface when possible and you should be fine. Unfortunately, that's not the only problem.
There's something I have to tell you about EE. She's afraid of water. When she was 6 years old, she almost drowned with my father in our swimming pool.
And you think she can't swim because of the traumatic experience?
I haven't seen her since that day, but yes, I think so.
Damn, if she still can't swim, we're in trouble.
You're telling me? After all, the entire area is completely flooded, so swimming is kind of a necessity. Otacon asks Raiden to try and help her through it, which he doesn't seem to have any other choice but to do. Before he has a chance to reach Emma though, Raiden once again comes face to face with Vamp, who's apparently been waiting for him. He seems to think that Raiden was the one who killed the president, and he also reveals that Arsenal still has a so-called purified hydrogen bomb, meaning there's still a nuclear threat. This starts a pretty interesting, if rather easy and somewhat silly boss fight. Vamp's tactic is basically to dive under the pool of water in the room and suddenly jump back out, balance on one of the railings and start to throw knives. He will also limit Raiden's movement on occasion by throwing these things that somehow freezes him in place, but he's still pretty easy to deal with. After Vamp seemingly drowns, Raiden rushes off to rescue Emma, finding her hiding in a closet. She's somewhat reluctant to trust Raiden at first, but he manages to convince her that he's there to help. Unfortunately, she's still not exactly fond of the water.
You can swim. You used to love it.
How do you know?
Your brother told me.
He's really here?
That's right. He's here to rescue you.
I don't believe you. He would never come for me.
Emma, we can go over all that later. But first, we have to get out of here.
No! I hate water!
Excuse me, Emma, but you don't quite seem to understand the situation. It doesn't really matter how much you hate the water. If you don't start moving, you're gonna fucking drown! You don't really have a choice here. In any case, Raiden does eventually convince her to just hold on to him as he swims through the area, and they eventually make it out of the basement. As it turns out though, Emma's legs don't work all that well as she's been injected with something. Raiden is therefore forced to guide Emma over to the oil fence they have to cross in order to get to Arsenal Gear's entrance. When they eventually reach the oil fence, it seems Emma will have to cross it on her own as it's apparently not sturdy enough to support both of them. As her legs have suddenly gotten better, Emma does eventually agree, even though she is fairly reluctant. In order to keep her safe, Raiden uses a sniper rifle to take care of any guards or turrets in her way as she crosses the fence. Unfortunately, as Emma nears the other side of the oil fence where Snake is waiting for her, Vamp suddenly materializes out of thin air, grabs Emma and holds her at knife point. Although Raiden manages to fire at and kill him yet again, Emma still gets mortally stabbed through her abdomen. Snake manages to pick her up, but she's fading fast. After they've all made it to the computer room, Snake inserts the virus disk Emma's prepared as it starts uploading. Of course it stops before the upload is complete, leaving Raiden, Snake and Otacon unsure as to its effectiveness. Emma then finally dies as she and Otacon share a rather long-winded but still pretty emotional farewell. There's not really any time to dwell on this sad scene though, as the remaining trio still need to find a way to board Arsenal Gear and stop it, which apparently requires someone on the inside to give them a helping hand. Snake sends Otacon to rescue the remaining hostages with the Kasatka before he seemingly betrays Raiden.
You can come out now.
A ninja? What the?
Arsenal's going to take off.
You!
Ready for some shut-eye?
Wait, what? The ninja was Olga? How could I ever have figured that out? I mean, it's not like she has a particularly distinct voice or any sort of musical cue, and we definitely never saw her face inside that outfit. Except that she does, and we did. But still, he could have been Fat Man. When Raiden wakes up, he finds himself in a rather familiar situation. Yup, he's strapped to the same torture device Snake was strapped to in Shadow Moses, and he's confronted by Solidus and Ocelot. It also turns out Solidus is actually quite familiar with Raiden, as he used to train him.
The 80s. A civil war. When you were barely 10 years old, you became the platoon leader of the small boy unit. At the time, your outstanding kill record earned you several nicknames, including White Devil and Jack the Ripper. When the war ended, you disappeared from the relief center. I wondered what happened to you. I should have known they would recruit you.
Yeah, apparently, Raiden used to be a child soldier under Solidus' command. If you're wondering why Raiden doesn't remember any of this, it seems someone had his memories altered. Kind of. Don't worry, I'll explain in a bit. After Solidus and Ocelot leave to prepare Arsenal gear for their assault, Olga enters and informs Raiden that she was actually sent in by the Patriots to provide him with support. Apparently, her child is being held hostage by the Patriots and will be killed unless Olga follows their orders, which is why she donned the ninja disguise and betrayed her troops. Olga tells Raiden that Snake has his gear and that she'll release his restraints after she leaves. Raiden then receives a call from Rose, who wonders if what Solidus said was true, and this is where we get to what I was talking about earlier. Apparently, Raiden's memories were manipulated, but he still suffers from nightmares of his life as a child soldier, as he just can't forget those painful memories. And here's where I think the hate against Raiden really falls apart. I'm not saying that this backstory is completely perfect or that there isn't a bit of hamminess in the following performances, but how can you possibly call Raiden a boring character after this? I mean, this is some pretty intriguing and seriously dark shit. Honestly, how do you not find any of this even remotely interesting? Sure, Raiden may start off somewhat annoying and whiny, and his apparent inexperience might be slightly weird if he was actually a vicious and feared killer as a child, but I certainly wouldn't call him unappealing. Him revealing all of this in front of Rose might be the most humanizing moment the series has ever had.
I can never forget.
Jack.
I'm afraid of the night. That's why I don't sleep next to you.
You should have told me.
Told you what? That I'm a killer? And always have been?
Yeah, that's some pretty serious shit. Okay, so the tension and impact of all of this is a bit ruined by immediately following it up with a sequence where Raiden runs around in a comical fashion completely naked, but still, not exactly the worst characterization ever. In any case, Raiden is then released, but as he's naked, he can't do much until he finds Snake. Before he can do so though, the Colonel contacts Raiden, but he starts acting pretty weird. He tells Raiden to play his role, he threatens Rose's life, and then he starts spouting random, nonsensical, and actually somewhat creepy nonsense.
Turn the game console off right now.
What did you say?
The mission is a failure. Cut the power right now.
What's wrong with you?
Something happened to me last Thursday when I was driving home. I had a couple of miles to go. I looked up and saw a glowing orange object in the sky, to the east. It was moving very irregularly. Suddenly, there was intense light all around me, and when I came to, I was home. What do you think happened to me?
Utterly confused, Raiden eventually finds Snake and gets his gear back as they both head off to try and stop Arsenal. When Otacon contacts them, Raiden tells him about the Colonel's lost transmission and asks him to check up on Campbell. When Otacon eventually gets back to him, he has some rather shocking and difficult to believe news. The Colonel is calling from inside Arsenal.
What the hell does this mean? I think it means you've been talking to an AI. The Colonel is, in part, your own creation, cobbled together from expectations and experience.
That's crazy!
But it's probably the truth. The virus may be starting to affect GW, which would explain the Colonel's behavior.
What? It could happen? In a fever dream? Yeah, this is just so confusing and honestly completely idiotic. You really want me to believe that an AI somehow managed to magically cook up a military colonel using Raiden's memories and expectations? How? And why? Well, there actually is a plan behind all of this, but we'll get to that. For now, Snake and Raiden keep going, even though Raiden is very confused and troubled by all of this. Before they get too far though, they're confronted by Fortune, who's hell-bent on exacting her revenge on Snake, as she believes he's the one who killed her father during the tanker mission. Snake tells Raiden to continue onwards as he stays behind to deal with Fortune. Raiden then finds himself in some sort of holodeck or something, as Solidus' voice is heard in the background. He tells Raiden about something called the S3 plan, which stands for Solid Snake Simulation. Apparently, this is a plan by the Patriots to create a perfect warrior in the vein of Solid Snake, and he claims Raiden is the result of this project. Solidus then calls forth a squadron of Metal Gear Rays as Raiden is forced to take them down. He unfortunately can't destroy all the Rays though, but as he's about to be squashed by one of them, Olga suddenly turns up to save him. After revealing that her child will die if Raiden dies, Solidus kills her and is about to do the same to Raiden. Luckily for him, the Rays then start to malfunction. Yeah, it turns out the virus has finally taken hold of GW and is shutting it down, causing the Rays to go amok. It's okay though, because Solidus manages to deal with them using a fucking submachine gun. No, I'm so not kidding you. Really? These huge walking tanks originally designed for nuclear warfare can be taken down by a fucking P-90? Why the hell did Raiden waste all those stingers then? These things are fucking pathetic! Either way, after the rays are dealt with, Solidus puts Raiden in a chokehold as Fortune brings in Snake. Raiden is then knocked out, and when he wakes up, it seems he and Snake have been handcuffed and taken to the top of Arsenal in front of Solidus, Ocelot and Fortune. Solidus then reveals to Fortune that the capture of Arsenal gear was never his real objective.
What was your objective then?
A list of names of the Patriots! They were planning to extend their control to digital information flow with GW and Arsenal. That means the information they want to filter out is contained in GW, including that list of the highest 12 members of the Patriots Wiseman's Committee.
That's right, Solidus just wanted the names of the Wiseman's Committee members so he could hunt them down and kill them. Although GW is now destroyed, he claims there's still a solution, but as Fortune just wants to hurt the Patriots and the people they control, she decides to still prepare Arsenal for a nuclear launch, which Solidus is fine with. Before she can do anything though, Ocelot interrupts with a suspicious cackle. He claims that everything that has happened up to this point has actually been an exercise set up by the Patriots, that this was the true S3 plan, a recreation of Shadow Moses. Oh, so that's why there were so many similarities to the previous game. Here I thought it was just laziness, but nope, there was an actual plan behind all of it. It was supposed to be as similar as possible. Yeah, are you picking up that weird smell too? That whiff of, what is it, oh, that's right, bullshit! Either way, yes, everything that's happened in this game was apparently orchestrated by the Patriots to provide GW with the data necessary to successfully recreate the perfect soldier. Ocelot also claims that the virus that shut down GW was also programmed to delete any information about the Wiseman's Committee, meaning Solidus's plans were doomed to fail all along. After learning that all the suffering and misfortune she's gone through was just a part of a test set up by the Patriots, Fortune rightfully gets a bit ticked off. As she's about to fire on Ocelot, however, it seems she's not actually as bulletproof as first thought.
How could...
You're no Lady Luck. You have nothing that we didn't give you.
Yes, it turns out that even Fortune's seemingly magical ability to dodge bullets was just the cause of some sort of electromagnetic deflection device the Patriots somehow placed on her without her ever noticing. What? No, seriously. What? How in the mother of arse does any of that make any fucking sense? First of all, how the flying fuck is this sort of a device supposed to be even remotely plausible? And second of all, how could they possibly place this rather large device on her body without her ever noticing or discovering it at a later point? I mean, it's not exactly a fucking microchip. Oh, and riddle me this as well. If she was just protected by this device the whole time, how the hell do you explain this scene?
She is Lady Luck.
Honestly, try explaining all of this without sounding like a complete lunatic. I dare you. So after Fortune dies, Ocelot boards Ray and is about to finish off the others when he suddenly has another seizure and becomes Liquid again. Since Ocelot knows the location of the Patriots, Liquid claims to do so as well as he uses Ray to leap away from Arsenal, sending it, Raiden and Solidus crashing into the city, while Snake manages to free himself and follow Liquid. Raiden and Solidus end up on the roof of Federal Hall as Raiden gets contacted by a fake Colonel and a fake Rose, informing him that they, meaning the AIs, are still around as only GW was destroyed. They claim to actually be some sort of new life form that evolved within the White House over the years. In addition, they reveal that the S3 plan actually has nothing to do with Solid Snake after all.
The S3 plan does not stand for Solid Snake Simulation. What it does stand for is Selection for Societal Sanity. What you experienced was the final test of its effectiveness.
That's crazy.
You heard what President Johnson said.
The Arsenal's GW system is the key to their supremacy.
The objective of this exercise was to establish such a method.
Now, this whole thing gets pretty damn confusing, but I'll try to explain. Basically, the Patriots used the Shadow Moses incident as a model for an exercise to test the S3 plan's effectiveness. If the S3 program could orchestrate, control, and solve such a complex situation, it would prove capable of controlling human will and consciousness in whatever way the Patriots deemed beneficial. Like I said, pretty damn confusing, so if you're completely lost at this point, I can't blame you. Hell, I've heard all of this more times than I can count, and I'm still not sure I completely understand everything. Seriously, they might as well have called this the WTF plan. This leads us to the final battle of the game, and it's not really all that great. No, it's not terrible either, but it is kind of anticlimactic. It's basically just a pretty standard sword fight that can be rendered completely ludicrous by just flailing your sword around wildly. Honestly, you don't really have to use that much strategy here, just fling your sword like a madman and you'll most likely win. After defeating Solidus, Raiden has one final powwow with Snake, who just suddenly turns up. He reveals that he still has the virus that Emma wrote, as the one he handed back to Raiden was a fake. As the virus was intended to delete the names of the Patriot members from GW, it should contain a list of those same names, and Snake plans to track them down with Otacon's help. Snake also says he'll track down Olga's child as he and Raiden part ways. Raiden is then reunited with Rose as the game ends with him proposing to her. Well, I say it ends, but there is actually one more rather significant scene after the credits.
I've finished going over that disc.
Did you find the Patriots list?
Of course. It contains the personal data of 12 people.
Where are they?
Well, we were right about them being on Manhattan, but...
But what?
They're already dead. All 12 of them.
When did it happen?
Well, about 100 years ago.
What the hell?
Well, considering all the other weird shit in this game, I guess it shouldn't really be a surprise that the secret rulers of this world apparently consist of zombies. That's actually kind of tame, all things considered. Overall, this game is kind of all over the place. Oh, I still love it, don't get me wrong, but it's not exactly handled all that smoothly. The gameplay is very enjoyable and expertly crafted, but the story is way too similar to the last two games, even if it is intentional, and there's just far too many confusing and or downright ludicrous moments. Again, I still love this game, but I'm not a complete moron. I understand that Raiden wasn't what fans were expecting. It is, or at least can be, ridiculously convoluted, and let's just face it, it's stupid as all hell. That said, I don't really think there's anything offensive or all that boring here either, and as mentioned, the gameplay is superb. Ultimately, your enjoyment of the game comes down to how much you're willing to overlook and or forgive. I doubt most people will really care all that much about most of the relatively minor problems here though, as they usually are just that, minor. No, this is certainly not the strongest entry in the franchise, but it's far, far from the weakest as well. It still gets my recommendation. There is still one question that remains unanswered here though. How could all the members of the Wise Men's Committee already be long dead? Well, in order to explain that to us, the series decided to drastically change things up for the next entry by taking a trip down memory lane. Yep, it's time to learn the origin of a certain ample superior.
Hint, hint.